Hi everybody, this is Stan Molyneux from Freedom Main Radio. I hope you're doing well. This is the truth about the Sony hack. As doubtless you have heard, November 24th, Sony announced that there was a breach into its network. Their computers have been somewhat fried, files have been deleted and so on, and a group of hackers took credit for the attack, and they called themselves Guardians of Peace, or GOP, which was a good clarification for me because I thought maybe the Republicans were behind it. 2 days later, these hackers began leaking sensitive company data, emails, finances, employee information, and even 4 unreleased films which they put out into the torrent planet. And they claim to have collected about 100 terabytes of data from Sony's service, and only a tiny fraction of it has been made public so far. What was in this was pretty devastating to people: 47,000 social security numbers, credit card information, passport details, and Sony raised the ire of people it had laid off by not informing them that their sensitive information had been leaked, and by not giving them credit monitoring services, which it was giving current employees. Now, we'll get into some of the whys, but let's go into some of the background. These things almost never come out of nowhere. Sony was warned about a year ago that hackers had infiltrated its network and were stealing gigabytes of data several times a week. And this was a pattern of lapses predating the recent attack. And the hackers from about a year ago, they haven't been identified. In late 2013, they sifted through a bunch of data on the company's network, encrypted the information to cover their tracks, and mined it on a regular schedule. Even after discovering the infiltration and theft of data, Sony didn't conduct an audit to determine how much content was actually stolen. And at the time, Sony blamed the breach on the hacktivist anonymous group called Anonymous. And they, Anonymous, through their representatives, denied stealing the data. Investigations within Sony found that at least 3 hacking groups had infiltrated the PlayStation networks during that time. The group causing the most damage was the Russian ring that had been inside Sony networks for about 2 years, stealing and selling video games. They found the keys that decrypted the digital right management protection, the copyright protection of Sony products. According to a message, and again, these things are always hard to confirm, but according to a message supposed to have come from Anonymous, December 19th, 2014, they said, "Seriously, Sony, we warned you. We infiltrated your systems long before North Korea. We thought you'd take it as a warning and fix your shit." And did that. So, Sony Pictures Entertainment and media outlets immediately began speculating that the hackers were related to, or coming from, or authorized by, or paid by North Korea, and that these hackers had targeted Sony because, of course, there's a Seth Rogen, James Franco comedy, I guess you'd say, called The Interview, which is a story about 2 journalists who are recruited by the CIA to assassinate Kim Jong-un, the dictator of North Korea. The hackers told a reporter, and again, this is, I assume that there's some verification the reporters do, they said that our aim, said the hackers, is not at the film The Interview, as Sony Pictures suggests, but it is widely reported as if our activity is related to The Interview. And so given that a bunch of hackers have been inside and wondering about the Sony networks for over a year, it seems to strike a blow against the recent hack as a result of The Interview graphically depicting the gruesome assassination of a head of state in North Korea. On December 8th, after over a week of speculation, the Guardians of Peace, the GOP, finally made its first reference to the film in a public announcement. So, once the media started saying, "Oh, it's about this movie called The Interview," after a while the hackers started to talk about it, but didn't talk about it initially or at the beginning. So if the hack was designed to stop the release of The Interview, why did they only first mention it 2 weeks after the Sony attack became known? Also, if they intended to prevent people from seeing the movie, and in particular the death scene of Kim Jong-un, why would the hackers release that death scene, which is the most controversial part of it? I mean, it really doesn't make much sense. If they find the murder of the foreign leader depicted in the film so offensive, why did they release just that part? Now, the hackers, at least one group, reportedly breached Sony's network over a year ago, it's pretty unlikely that they would find a lot of information about the movie back then. The North Korean government actually first expressed its outrage over the release of this film in June of this year, 2014. So the FBI and the U.S. government has now said that the attack originated or was in North Korea. So how did they figure that out? Well, researchers found that 4 files which may have been used in the attack were compiled, which is when you take the quasi-human language of computer code and translate it into the ones and zeros of machine language. The 4 files were compiled on a computer that was using the Korean language. Wired magazine has quite rightly pointed out, quote, an attacker can set the language on a compilation machine to any language they want, and researchers note can even manipulate information about the encoded language after a file is compiled to throw investigators off. So the idea that, you just change your locale to North Korea, you compile, and suddenly this is a smoking gun implicating North Korea seems, I'm not a lawyer, nor a cybersecurity expert, seems to my amateur eye, let's just say, thin at best. Cybersecurity expert Mark Rogers pointed out another flaw in using the language of the computer as evidence. Quote, the fact that the code was written on a PC with Korean locale and language actually makes it less likely to be North Korea. Not least because they don't speak traditional, quote, Korean in North Korea. They speak their own dialect, and traditional Korean is forbidden. This is one of the key things that has made communication with North Korean refugees difficult. And of course, it is completely trivial to change the language and locale in the computer before compiling code on it. So if the FBI is saying, well, it's using Korean, well, if they don't even speak that Korean in North Korea, not fantastic. And of course, hackers in general would alter the metadata of their malicious files. Because look, these hackers are taking enormous risks. I mean, they're in Aaron Swartz's 30 years in jail territory if they're caught. And so they are not going to provide obvious clues. If they're smart enough to do what they're doing, the idea that they would find obvious clues that a government agency could find within a couple of days to lead them back seems ridiculous. So in this article, the security expert Rogers also suggested that an attack from within Sony was a more likely scenario. Quote, it's clear from the hard-coded paths and passwords in the malware that whoever wrote it had extensive knowledge of Sony's internal architecture and access to key passwords. While it's plausible that an attacker could have built up this knowledge over time and then used it to make the malware, Occam's razor suggests that the simpler explanation of an insider. It also fits with the pure revenge tack that this started out as. So hard-coded paths and passwords, if you write code, you can say, well, go to this location on this complex network and get this data, and that would indicate, at least to me, somewhat of an inside job. So, as we mentioned, December 19th, the FBI said North Korea was behind the Sony attack. 3 key points. 1, technical analysis says that of the data deletion malware used in this attack revealed links to other malware the FBI knows North Korean hackers previously developed. For example, there were similarities in specific lines of code, encryption algorithms, data deletion methods, and compromised networks. 2, the FBI also observed significant overlap between the infrastructure used in this attack and other malicious cyber activity the U.S. government had previously linked directly to North Korea. For example, the FBI discovered that several Internet Protocol IP addresses associated with known North Korean infrastructure communicated with IP addresses that were hard-coded into the data deletion malware used in this attack. 3, separately, the tools used in the SPE attack have similarities to a cyber attack in March of last year against South Korean banks and media outlets, which was carried out by North Korea. Now, the deletion malware that the FBI mentions actually uses a driver from a commercially available product called RawDisk. This driver has been used in previous attacks. So the fact that this driver matches the signature of drivers used in other attacks, not surprising at all. Now, the IP addresses that were hard-coded, it means typed directly into the deletion malware, well, they're known proxies. A proxy is a computer that shields or redirects information from another computer. They're known proxies for hackers, spam, phishing, malware, and other malicious activities. These IP addresses can be traced to 7, count them, 7 different countries: Bolivia, Cyprus, Italy, Poland, Thailand, Singapore, and the United States. In other words, they can be used by just about everyone, not just North Korea. cybersecurity expert Robert Graham responded, quote, "The FBI has posted a press release describing why they think it's North Korea that carried out the attack on Sony. While there may be more things we don't know, on its face, it's complete nonsense. The reason it's nonsense is that the hacker underground shares code. They share everything. Tools, techniques, exploits, own systems, botnets, and infrastructure. Different groups even share members. It's implausible that North Korea would develop its own malware from scratch." So a lot of this malware stuff is, it's like Frankencode. You just stitch a whole bunch of stuff together that you share with other people so that you don't have to reinvent the wheel. And so the idea that there's some stuff in this Frankencode that was used in other attacks would be natural. Adam Kuyawa, head of malware intelligence at Malwarebytes, noted, quote, "This evidence does point fingers at North Korea, but once again, anything can be faked on the cyberfront until there is additional confirmation by North Korea and or more intelligence released by the U.S. government. Public opinion should remain neutral." So the FBI is either completely incompetent, a possibility we can't rule out given its terrible track record, as you have noted in the past in terms of foreign intelligence, is the U.S. foreign intelligence had zero idea whatsoever that the Soviet Union was about to collapse, one of the biggest events in geopolitical world history, and it also had no advanced knowledge, apparently, of 9/11. So, by the FBI trying to pin this on North Korea despite very thin evidence, they're either completely incompetent, could be, or they're pushing a dangerous political agenda, which is even more, I think, of concern. Now, a day after the FBI announced, "Ooh, it's North Korea," the Guardians of Peace responded, quote, "The result of investigation by FBI is so excellent that you might have seen what we were doing with your own eyes. We congratulate you success. FBI is the best in the world. You will find the gift for FBI at the following address." The address was a link to a YouTube video, not Rickrolling, but here's an excerpt for your enjoyment. So does this excerpt seem like the modus operandi of a paranoid and dictatorial nation state or a bunch of online trolls? As Brian Krebs of Krebs on Security commented, quote, "It just doesn't smell right. Too many inconsistencies in motivation, action, and reaction. Whoever is responsible seems to understand Western media culture quite well. Despite what has been said in the media, this does not appear to be a sophisticated attack, and with a little insight up, this could have been done by an amateur group initially for the lulz," which means just for the fun and damage, "and later for more political reasons that match the media frenzy about all of this." So, of course, the jury's still out, but let's say that the hackers are not related to North Korea. So, who are they and what could their motive be? So, on November 30th, responding to an inquiry from the American International Data Group news service, the hackers described themselves as, quote, "an international organization